We're back again live with Kathy Gannon from Islamabad. And if you guys have seen any of the news from the previous 24 hours, you know that a lot of things have changed since we did our podcast yesterday. Mainly, uh, the leadership in Islamabad has been taken out by U.S. military strikes. Um, and Ayatollah Khomeini, I always mispronounce his name because I know the previous Ayatollah Khomeini pronounced it differently than the current one. But the one that was in
Ho-
now was in there for 3 decades, right? You'll know how to do it because you covered the Middle East and
Home, Homenai. Homenai.
Khamenei. So there was Ayatollah Khomeini who was in charge for about a decade, and it was the first supreme leader after the fall of the Shah of Iran. And then your latest Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, was in for 30 years, and
Yeah.
up until yesterday was serving with an iron fist in a country that struggled for a long time to determine its fate, but it was clearly in the hands of his leadership and backed by the Republican Guard. And I wondered if you just wanted to talk about, first of all, let's talk about his death and what that means to the people of Iran and to the people of the region, and whether we think that power vacuum that we talked about so much yesterday will still come into play.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. Because first, the Iran administration is moving quite quickly. They've already come up with a replacement. They've already started to reform the Council of Guardians leadership, which is the leadership in Iran. What was surprising for me was that Khomeini stayed in his office with his daughter and his son-in-law. So clearly, he knew that was going to be one of the first targets. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science. So I feel like he was prepared for this, or wanted it, or whatever. It is Ramadan. It's a particularly holy month in the Islamic calendar, and so I mean, I don't have any evidence of this, but it was very surprising to me that he had stayed in his office. So I feel like he must have known that was going to be one of the first targets.
Do you
If
think that was probably
anyone,
because he didn't want to feel as though he was hiding from the Americans and sort of a sense of that Iranian cultural pride that we spoke about?
well, I mean, I think that that's certainly part of it, but I think they could have couched it in a lot of ways that wouldn't have made it look like he was running away. You know, he was in safety. He was at an undisclosed location. So I feel like there must have been some discussion beforehand among the Iranian leadership how to go forward, because there has been quite a quick naming of successors and several successors, because it's a council, and that they've chosen. I'm not sure that they've chosen the next leader, but they certainly have the structure. That they've already begun working on. So I feel like there must have been some discussion beforehand. That's one thing. Um, so, but clearly the war's not over. And I'm also a little surprised that they keep announcing the names of the people, because that I would think would make them a bit more of a target. But anyway, the names are out there. So
You mean of
I
the
feel
additional
like,
people on their side who were killed in strikes, or the ones that are now taking over?
yes, the ones that are now taking over, those names are out there. So I feel like, that he stayed in his office. He had to have known that it was going to be hit, and hit quickly. Whether he did it to just say, third finger to the Americans and Israelis, regardless, I think they must have discussed, known that he would die, and must have discussed the leadership to what comes next. I feel that. Have absolutely no proof of it. Absolutely no one has said that in their commentary, but it's very suspicious why he was in his office. That that was going to be one of the first places hit.
Well, and
It's not a.
he automatically at this point becomes a martyr, which is a big deal
It,
in that part of the world.
it,
Just remember the Soleimani when he was hit, and how big a situation that was for them. This is like 100 times bigger. Um,
well, you're right, and it's also Ramadan. So Ramadan is a very
right.
holy month, and it's a very in Iran is mostly Shias. He's a Shia leader, of course. So it's a very holy month for all of Muslims. So for someone in his position and of his serious religiosity and that, I mean, I'm sure it was for him he to go in during the month of Ramadan, and that way would have been something he would have aspired to. And they've certainly mentioned this over and over again in Iranian television, Iranian radio, and saying that, he's a martyr. He's a martyr during the holy month of Ramadan. There's been people out on the streets, as Shias do, the beating of the chest and that, doing that. They declared it 40 days of mourning. But it's not over yet. The attacks are still continuing. So the long term, what does it mean? We don't know, because if they go after some of the people that have been named, and that then do you have another first tier, second tier to go to? I mean, at what point don't you?
Well,
So I
you
think
remember during the first Gulf War, the U.S. military generals were talking about, taking out Saddam Hussein, and they said you cut the head off and the rest will follow, but not necessarily in this case because they have a succession lineup. Saddam Hussein, his sons would have taken over, and that would have been about the line of
yeah,
succession. But here, you have the whole Islamic Council and the people who follow into those cleric roles, right? And I think the other thing
yeah,
that's noteworthy about what you're saying about Ramadan, we remember the war in Afghanistan and similar conflicts. People in that world don't fight during Ramadan if they can avoid it, because
yeah,
it's
they
such
do
a
fight after iftar. When they
well,
open their
you can't
fast,
fight right
they
after
start
iftar.
firing lock.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
But during the day, when they're
yeah, very
fasting,
quiet.
they're very quiet. And so it would have been extra insulting. It'd be almost like hitting the White House, right, during Christmas holiday.
Yeah, well, I don't think it would be insulting for them. It's not because he died. I mean, whether they hit it during the fasting period, so much the better, because he died. So that it's a particularly significant death during Ramadan. If you die during Ramadan, that has a special elevated meaning. Maybe sort of similar if you die during Lent or something. I don't know if that's comparable, frankly. But what really is significant is that he stayed there and he must have known. So that means there was discussion. So that means there was planning. So the and I haven't seen a lot of talk about this, but I think it's very significant. That means that the leadership, well, I don't think Trump or Netanyahu have a day after scenario, but I think the leadership in Iran were prepared for Khamenei's death. And that means they were prepared. Okay, what comes next? Okay, because they were very quick to name people, name the next succession on the council
Mm.
the, of guardians or whatever. So I think it's very interesting. So I think that from the Iranian perspective is much more was much more planning for the day after or for the day after Khomeinei's death.
Hmm.
So that's one thing. But they've named them, and so you have to wonder where are they? Because why would you name them while the war is still going on? Because now they're going to be looking for them. But I don't know. I have no idea where they are.
I
But
wonder if that's
so,
just a
uh,
source of Iranian pride. They want to show that they have a leadership so that nobody else can step in and fill that vacuum.
well, no, I think they're very smart and they're very organized and calculating. I mean, he was sitting in his office. They had to know that he was going to go, either at the beginning or at some point. So I think they what they did was they knew he was sitting there. They knew that he would die. So with him, before they attacked, I'm sure there was discussion of what do we do, because I'm sure he knew, and it was planned. You don't stay in the office when the Israelis and Americans are attacking you. You
Yeah,
do not stay in your office.
cruise missiles and F-35s, and yeah,
Not not rocket science, and the
yeah,
Iranians are smart. So
mm,
this was intentional. So if it was intentional, then they made arrangements beforehand.
yeah,
So they had discussed it. So I don't know what that means in terms of, it's still in the middle. It's only the second day of the war. And so we don't know what intelligence the Israelis have. I'm sure whatever intelligence the Americans have, they have from the Israelis, quite honest.
yeah.
But so it's still early. So we don't know. Um, what intelligence they have. Do they have this leadership structure that they know about? Where because they named three the last I saw. They might have named more since then, but the last I saw was three. So. So for me, that's the first thing, and it's the most interesting thing because clearly the Iranians, and they're very smart and very calculated, and so I think they had these discussions beforehand, and they had them with Khomeini. So
Okay.
I could be totally wrong, but
No,
so they
it is
have
curious.
already a point.
I haven't seen that reported, that thought process reported anywhere. So let's get on to the next point, which is
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
how does that then allow them to be more secure against any potential internal struggle and uprising against the current Islamic regime?
Well, I mean, once you announce it, and they've announced it very quickly that they've done this, so that now sends a message to any potential, uh, um, you know, people that might be thinking of taking advantage of the chaos. That okay, it's a
There's
vacuum.
no chaos.
That,
We got it locked in.
hmm?
There's no
Yeah.
chaos. We have it locked in. We have a government. Don't even think about it.
Yes, sort of thing. I think what the Iranians are worried about, or what they seem to be talking about anyway, is the balkanization of Iran. That there is some attempt to try to create different areas of um, opposition or disruption. Because Iran already has problems in its Baluchistan Sistan province, which is a majority Sunni province in a majority Shia
Hmm.
country. So it already has a number. So I think Iran has repeatedly mentioned that they are concerned about this, and they are saying that we won't allow for Iran to be divided. So I think that's one of their big concerns. Could it
Hmm.
happen? Perhaps. You know, um, is that part of a strategy that Netanyahu and Israel has thought about? And if so, how would it play out, and what would it look like? I think is is difficult to know
Well,
at this point.
according to the New York Times this morning, I talk with you guys all the time about, everybody has the mainstream media, they're shitbagging them all the time. And there's a lot of shitbagging to be doing on the mainstream media, especially the broadcast side. But I would say this morning, if you don't have, first of all, the news that I read this morning about what happened in Pakistan, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I read from the Associated Press, and for the first time, something coming out of Islamabad about Pakistan that I read today was not from Kathy Gannon, because she's recently retired from that. But we're lucky because we have her be able to talk about opinions today, whereas before at the AP that was not really permissible. But that vast knowledge she has, we're bringing with you today. But what I would say is that the New York Times this morning was all over this story. And if you don't have a subscription to the New York Times, you should be getting one, because you want to know what's going on in the world. There are very few new organizations that are based here in the United States that have dedicated the resources around the globe. I guarantee you, every country that is mentioned in this long, extensive 22-minute read at the New York Times, they have correspondents and people in that region and in those countries, which is not normal for most U.S.
I
news
mean,
organizations anymore, right? AP is probably one of the
yeah.
few ones that still has people in all these countries we're talking about, but they give you a different context because the AP's limits on the size of their stories and the kind of things they can say are a little bit different than New York Times. But anyways, two news organizations this morning to get caught up, and you're caught up, and then you can get into talking about the repercussions of that with folks like Kathy and myself. But so that's just my pitch today for, if you're not subscribing to Kathy Gannon's Substack, and it's just at Kathy Gannon. Go find it and subscribe to it. And if you guys aren't paid subscribers of it, support it. She's retired, sitting there in Islamabad. And when everybody else is being told to shelter in place, Kathy Gannon, I asked her this morning, "Are you sheltered in place?" And she said, "I'm not sheltered in place," because Kathy Gannon doesn't shelter in place. She's been covering the region for 35 to 38 years, something outrageous like that.
38 years, yeah,
38 years.
something like that.
But that does take us to what we talked about yesterday, which we were talking internally about the second, third, and fourth order effects of the region, but externally, we're looking at Pakistan this morning. We're all waking up to the fact that consulates in Pakistan have been attacked with protesters, and the Pakistani government is having to put those down. I think the last number I read, which probably isn't accurate at this point because it was read an hour ago, you had 9 people killed and a bunch of other people
Yeah.
injured. In the meantime, the Pentagon's reporting with no verification of anything, because we no longer have a Pentagon press corps, and no people on ships to witness any of this stuff. So everything they report to me, I see with a great degree of skepticism. But they're reporting 3 service members killed. They don't say where. CENTCOM's press release does not say where. 5 seriously wounded as a part of the operation at Epic Fury. That's directly from their press release. So we know that we've got dead and wounded, and we don't have anybody witnessing what's going on in those places. So that's terrible for democracy and for journalism. But to Pakistan, the attacks in Pakistan, we didn't think about this yesterday. I mean, we should,
Yeah,
because we see things like
yeah,
happened in Libya and Benghazi and on anniversaries and such like that. But there is a large group of Islamic militant groups in Pakistan, as well as a great degree of moderates, and they always seem to be fighting for control of that country. So, what do we know about this morning that you would think that we all need to be paying attention to?
yeah. Well, and and exactly, we didn't discuss this yesterday, and I think even Pakistan was taken a little aback by the ferocity of the attack, and the attack was down in there was one in Lahore as well, and even here in Islamabad there were protests, demonstrations. But the really serious one was in southern Karachi, on the Arabian Sea, and it was a large group. Karachi too has been battered by militant violence from several militant groups. But I think you also have to understand that in Pakistan, for a long period of time, Pakistan has always also been used as a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Saudi financed some quite vicious Sunni militant groups like Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, Sepah-e-Saba, and Iran financed through Qom some Shia militant groups, quite strong ones who are down around Quetta. They were more in Baluchistan because there's a larger Shia population down there. So we should have been thinking about it because it has been violence by these groups in the past, both on the Sunni and the Shia side. So I think, and Karachi being close to Baluchistan, it was also and has been targeted by militant groups in the past, whether they're targeting the Chinese, whether they're targeting the Americans. Has been targeted. So today what happened was it was quite a vicious attack on the U.S. consulate. They didn't get through. They broke some windows and that, but the Pakistani military, or the Pakistani Rangers, Pakistan has a large contingent of paramilitary rangers in Karachi, and they stopped them in their tracks before they could get to the inside the compound, and it was quite uh, um, a, a relentless attack. You know what I mean? They didn't warn them away, that kind of thing. And 9 dead is quite a large number of dead. There's still 2 critically wounded, but the last number was 9 that were
Do we have
killed.
any
And then in
sense of who those 9 people were on one side or the other at this point, or is that still under wraps?
no, they were all the protesters.
Okay.
From what I understand, all the protesters. None of the guards or the paramilitary rangers were attacked. And there was also a protest in Lahore at the U.S. consulate there, and there was also an attempt in Islamabad. And there was a protest in Islamabad. They didn't get near to the U.S. embassy because the security here is quite tight and it's
They
quite a
locked it
distance.
down in Islamabad, man. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a diplomatic enclave, so you have to get in there, then get all the way to the embassy. I mean, there's lots of places for them to stop you before you can do it. They have done it in the past, but that was like back in 79.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, 79. So it is a very serious concern here in Pakistan. Also, what Pakistan did today is the prime minister wrote a letter to the Saudis and said um, that Pakistan stands with you, and Pakistan and such. Yeah, it's very interesting because that means they're not standing with Iran.
And it also means they're
So
in a tertiary way standing with the United States because the Saudis, of course, are attached to the United States. So that's a big
exactly.
deal. And so what would that will that anger the Islamic militant groups inside of Pakistan to the point where you might see the government in a shaky position at some point?
No, because no. First, because the Iran has a good relationship and it's a love-hate relationship. Pakistan is a majority Sunni nation, um, and while there are large pockets of Shias, and normally there's no issue between the two, but it has been the the seat of a proxy war, like I was saying, for decades here between the Saudis and the Iranians. So there are militant Sunni groups. They won't care that Pakistan has aligned itself with Saudi Arabia, but there are militant Shia groups, and these are the ones that are problematic. Today's protest and demonstrations was because of the death of Khomeini. They specifically um, centered their protests on his death, and it was part of their mourning for him as a great Shia leader. So it was very specific to Khomeini. They didn't come out yesterday, for example, because it was news was all around of this happening. But
Mhm.
once Khomeini died, and the news came out that he was gone, then they came out, and there was a real violent reaction. So Pakistan dealt with it quite seriously, but and by aligning itself with Saudi Arabia, which you have to understand, several weeks ago, maybe a couple of months, Pakistan signed a sort of a pact with Saudi Arabia, a security pact of sorts
Right.
with Saudi Arabia, saying we're here and we will always be here to protect you. And if you're ever in need, our defenses are your defenses, and we will protect your security.
Mhm.
That's a big thing because you have to remember Pakistan's also a nuclear armed nation.
Well, that was my
So
next point, actually. You want stability in Pakistan. When you talk about the president going out and with your National Guard Major Pete Hegseth running the Department of Defense, or Department of War, as he wants to call it, without congressional approval. You have these guys making these decisions, and we always are thinking about second, third, and fourth order effects. And to think that you might have upheavals and unrest in Pakistan, when in Pakistan, in fact, you worried about Iranian nuclear weapons getting nuclear capabilities. What about the overthrow of a government in Pakistan where they have nuclear control? Remember, that was a big deal before the Afghan war during 9/11, and who was going to control the nuclear weapons there, and could they fall into the wrong hands? And I think what you're saying to me today is not only do you think the government has control, but that they have the support of Saudi Arabia, which would back them militarily.
yeah. The government here has control. I mean, the government here is not in any danger because of a regime change in Iran. Um, Whether it stays with the Council of Guardians,
Mm.
they have no worries with that. I mean, and in this letter that they sent to Saudi Arabia, saying we are with you and we will always have your back, basically. Um, they didn't. They said, the best solution is peace. There should be no war. So they didn't trash Iran in any way. They just said we're with you, and we've always been longtime brothers, and your security is our security, kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, so I don't think Pakistan, as far as whether the council remains or whether there's a totally new administration in Iran, won't have a big impact. Certainly not on the government here. It's in full control, and the military, because Pakistan's military is very strong,
Yeah. And you have the
and
ISI, which most people don't really know much about, but obviously is a very strong organization when it comes to knowing what's going on inside the country of Pakistan. The,
sure.
that's the Pakistani military intelligence unit that runs well, some would say runs the country.
Well, no, the military does. The military leadership today, under the Field Marshal Munir, definitely has the control, including of ISI. But definitely, the military is very strong, and it's particularly strong today in Pakistan. And during those meetings that Trump has had with Shahbaz Sharif, the prime minister, the field marshal is also there
Mm.
at these meetings, and Trump said he's one of his very favorite generals. so, so I don't think there's any danger really of this administration or having an impact. They're quite strong. They're not, and these protests won't bring them down. Of course not at all. Because, but it is a serious, expression by Pakistan Shias too, that they're not also going to be completely quiet. But today's demonstration was very much a response to Khomeini's death and
Okay.
and killing him.
We're seeing just now, and I think it's Jerusalem Post is reporting that this will, if you haven't read this already, it's a fairly stunning information that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, has been killed, which
Ah,
you
that's right.
remember. Kathy will certainly remember, but you guys might remember him. He was the very thin, very charismatic leader of Iran, who was always very soft spoken, but very cool and confident, and considered a very strong leader in the sense of the Iranian government. And to see him,
Very,
he's a former president, but it just speaks to the level by which the United States is pointing their attacks. And now I'm not sure whether he was directly attacked and targeted or whether he was hanging around the groups that were hit. But nonetheless, that's going to be considered. I mean, that's a big name. It's as one of the
yeah.
big names you could hear in Iranian politics since 1979.
Yeah, but I don't think Ahmadinejad, there was any suggestion that Ahmadinejad was in the lineup
Right.
to replace Khomeini or the council. And Ahmadinejad, his cares, because I covered a couple of his elections
Mhm.
in Iran, and his appeal, and he's very extreme, there's no question. He was very committed to the Revolutionary Guard, and he was very extreme, and he wanted the revolution to stay as it was in 79. So there's no question of that. But he was also very effective economically, because he used to be the mayor of Tehran, and under his stewardship, the economy was good as it could be in Iran with all the sanctions. But
Mhm.
so they could have been targeting him specifically, because he was very anti-Israel. I mean, a lot of these deaths to America and that, I mean, half of them come from America or have studied in America, but so how real serious were those? But Ahmadinejad was quite very much um, uh, um, an anti-Israeli, anti-American,
But
and he
what
was
I
quite.
find interesting about him is he had that sort of Western charisma about him. He dressed as a Westerner,
Mhm.
and he had a very clean shaven look. When he would come and visit the United Nations, he was one of those kind of people who did engage despite his extremist views. So people, I think, saw him as one of those kind of leaders that his politics were one thing, but he was recognizable. He wasn't, he wasn't wearing Islamic clothes when you saw him most of the time. And
Yeah,
it was just one of those kind of Islamic leaders, and that I think a lot of people in that country liked because of his extremist views, but also he was recognizable because he didn't blend in like the rest of the Islamic clerics.
yeah, but see, this is our problem too, is that we see something and we judge, okay, it looks a little more Western, a little more clean shaven,
Mhm.
and
Well,
yeah, it
that's how
must
we
be.
got
But
Karzai, and that's how we got uh, uh,
what,
Ashraf Ghani, correct?
what, yeah, I mean, Karzai, not so much, and that was a lot of, but for sure that absolutely helped. And really, who would the United States want for a leader for Iran? Anybody who could speak English could come up and talk to them in English and be like, oh, very good. Pakistan's military leader, Musharraf, he had a glass of whiskey and a dog. So everybody said, whoa, what a guy. This guy's got really good, because he has whiskey. This is our problem in the West. We don't go beyond the layers, and Ahmadinejad, his extremism, and in his second term, there was a lot of protests, and particularly by women and students, that he put down really hard. But we don't look beyond that. We see, oh, that looks like it. And whereas somebody in an Islamic dress or in a beard and that, they might really have some ideas that are interesting in that, but our mind shuts down and we
Mhm.
say, oh, yeah, yeah. It really is a problem to try to understand these regions and their complexities, when we all do it. I mean, it's something in the West that, and unfortunately in our reporting, it's reflected in that.
I always tell people
And
that biggest problem that Americans have is that they don't travel. And because they don't travel, they have a tendency to see the world through those um, first that first tier of your lens. And that's
yeah,
exactly what you're speaking about. That you could be. There's a lot of people in around the world that look and sound a certain way, and we might like the way they look, but in the end, you have to look at their policies and what they're saying. So
absolutely.
obviously I agree with that, but it's one of those things that I noted. The one things I
Yeah,
noted but the same thing with the Afghan leadership. There were a lot of Afghan leaders running for election who had really interesting ideas, but never were put forward by the Americans because they did not speak English. And I think
Exactly.
that's the problem that we had. And I think that
Absolutely.
I don't want to take up too much of your time going down the Afghan road, but I always noted that when we were building roads to coast, we were trying to build, and I did a story on that, building that paved road to coast, and Americans were trying to guard, that road from Kabul to coast. The one thing I noted when we were talking to local leaders in those areas is many of them did not want those roads because they
No,
believed
yeah,
that they believed that all that didn't mean commerce. Like the Americans were saying, "Oh, we can send our commerce to Kabul and sell our goods there." That meant to them that you could project power from Kabul into their regions, and they did not like
yeah.
that idea because that meant a challenge to their authority. People don't seem to understand that what we may see as something great is oftentimes not what they see as great. And
But
it
that,
comes from the leadership perspective and
yeah.
also policy with our foreign policy as it relates to working within inside those countries.
Yeah. That's where a little bit of humility, a little less arrogance, a little more, um, looking at somebody and believing that they too are as smart as you are. Just because they don't speak your language and because they might have a beard and a turban doesn't mean that they aren't smart and they don't know what will work best. But unfortunately, especially when the US goes into other places that are not um, English speaking and are not yeah, I mean, and they look different and that there's an arrogance and a real lack of, I think, humility that would go a long way to helping people understand better a local situation, and a little more respect wouldn't hurt either.
Yeah. I think I have you for maybe, I'm over, I'm 2 minutes over, and I know you have people visiting. So,
Yeah, no problem. No problem at
uh,
all. Any other questions?
yeah, I think maybe we'll take maybe 2 or 3 questions from our audience because they came in on a Sunday morning here. Is that okay with you? We'll keep
Sure,
them short.
absolutely. Anybody who comes in on a Sunday morning, I'm with you.
Well, one of the questions from Gigi, who, Gigi, we're paying attention to you, buddy. We know that you're coming in every day. And her question this morning is, where's Congress in all of this? We seem to be working for Netanyahu now. Don't our reps have anything to say? And I think that's a good point I'd like to talk about just for a second, which is, we
Please.
talk about the War Powers Act, and they're screaming at the top of their lungs about wanting to go back in early and convene Congress to put into effect the War Powers Act, which our Constitution in the United States says is the law of the land, but has for many years been ignored. And here's the worst problem that comes with that. When you have a ruling last a couple of years ago now, I guess it's a couple of years, there's a year, it seems like I'm losing track of time, where the Supreme Court rules in the majority that says Trump is we used to believe that everybody in our country, including the president, was not above the law. And so now we have a ruling by the Supreme Court that says, well, as long as whatever law he's breaking is under the auspices of doing an official action, then somehow that relieves him of any responsibility. So now, what do you all think will happen? You think that they're going to be beholden to hold him to the Constitution on this rule? They will not. Even if they go in and demand the War Powers Act, I promise you, he's going to say, "Go fuck yourself," because he no longer is in a position where he has to obey the law. The Supreme Court has just told him that. They've given him carte blanche. And by the way, this is not me talking shit about Trump. Every president after him will now have that ability to say "fuck you" to Congress on whatever law they decide to break. And in this case, it just happens to be a Republican. The next case, it might be a Democrat. So they've done a grave injustice to the United States in terms of the Constitution, as far as I'm concerned, because he is not bound by this law anymore, as far as I'm concerned. And unfortunately, I think that's a great problem because the whole purpose of our Constitution and having that in effect is that we have collective groups of people deciding whether we're going to go to war with other countries or not. And that's just one effect. But I don't know. You tell me what your thoughts are on this, Kathy.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jeff, and you know the court ruling much better than I do. But I mean, when it came down, it was really for me mind-boggling. And it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat. The next president come along. Where's the balance? Where's the checks and balance where you could say, wait a minute, we have to decide as a nation, is this something we want? We want, and also I think with this particular president and not necessarily just him. I mean, the Iraq War. I mean, there's plenty of examples where um, the actions have been taken for reasons that the public or Congress have been either denied access to or lied to. And so I think the question is a really good question, and I think it's an important question. And I think that it is in many ways it's Netanyahu's war, and America has gone to war for Netanyahu. And yes, Trump wants it to be over quickly, and yes, he does not want to have American casualties, although he has warned of some, and there have been some. But what is the cost of this? Just maintaining everything that you have in the Gulf right now, and the
Well,
billions and
during the war in
billions.
Iraq or Afghanistan, their costs were roughly 3 billion a day.
Yes, yes, exactly. And so, I mean, the American people, I mean, I, as Canada was doing this, I mean, you have to pay with your taxes, your health care, your education, I mean, just common sense tells you where is this money coming from, and who's getting the benefit of this. But anyway, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's really is, and the problem is we move so far away from law-based society. Whether you like the laws or not, those are the laws: international laws, humanitarian laws. But we've allowed Israel to get away with completely ignoring all the international laws. I'm sorry, Venezuela, it was illegal. Bombing these boats without providing proof. I mean, that's illegal. You can't just go around uh, destroying boats
Well,
and
carrying the
arrest
drug
leaders.
boats, and you're not sending in anybody to pick up the drugs to make proof that it's there. You know,
Yes,
because
exactly. And
everybody knows whenever you hit a drug boat, in the past 40 years, that you have big bales of drugs floating around the ocean afterwards. You would think that if it was a drug boat,
pumping,
they would have taken the time to at least record it from their drone hits, which we see the
but
explosions of, or
yeah,
send in some choppers to pick up some of those drugs so that you have proof of it. But yeah, we're getting
yes,
side point. But
yes,
I hear
yeah.
the point.
And the fact you don't need the proof, the fact that you feel you don't need the proof. I mean, how many times has Netanyahu said we killed all these Hamas?
Mm.
And then you found out it was a school or it was something else. So the lack of proof that is required is it's
It's just
mind
a basic
boggling.
tenet of rule of law, and it's a basic tenet of democracy that we're ignoring, which I think is bad
Yeah,
for any government, regardless of your political party. I mean, I think
yeah, absolutely.
that's our job
Republican,
to point that out.
Democrat,
And
yeah,
we're also our job is, remember I said our job is to point out lies and hypocrisy, right? So my
yeah,
lie and hypocrisy discussion today would be: you did have a president who came in and criticized previous Democratic presidents for being the police of the world, and said that he would not do that, and that instead of starting wars, he would stop wars. So let's just keep that
yes,
in
I
the
do
context of
remember
what we
that.
saw started yesterday. I'm not saying whether killing or not killing the leadership of Iran is a good or bad thing. Let's let the world decide that on their own. And I think you're going to have a lot of people who are going to agree that this man was not beloved by people outside of Iran. But
Yeah.
the point is that when you say you're going to come in and do something and you do quite the contrary, it's worth noting.
It's worth noting, and it's also worth noting it's illegal. It's not about who it is. And when you start attaching that it's okay to break the law if you do it against this one, well, then there is no law, and it doesn't say anybody is good at all, and or judge that or defending the person. It's defending the law. If the
So
law is not
just to be
fair
clear,
for everyone,
state clearly why you think this particular action against Iran was illegal in a sense. I mean, we know it's illegal in the sense that it was not declared by the War Powers Act, but we've seen that happen in the past with previous administrations.
we had there was no UN vote on it. There was no international NATO vote on it. You went into Afghanistan after you invoked Article 5 of NATO. It didn't just everybody decide to go into Afghanistan. Um, the American system, however it works,
Article
if you
5,
can go to
people who don't, Kathy and I are doing inside baseball here, and I don't want them to be lost. But Article 5 of the UN Charter is that, when a country is attacked under the UN Charter, NATO has a responsibility to respond in kind on behalf of that
yeah,
attacked country. So in
yeah,
the case of Afghanistan, we were attacked by a foreign country, and some of those attackers came from training in Afghanistan, and some of them from Saudi Arabia, et cetera, et cetera. And in this case, your question is when was the United States attacked by Iran? The last time I remember they've attacked some of our bases in response to some of the things we've done, but they've
Yeah.
not tried to initiate a war with us, a war
Absolutely
since,
not. And you're absolutely right.
since 1979
Yeah,
when they attacked
exactly.
our
No,
embassy.
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, and so there has to be a law that is applicable for everyone, and that's not to say that that person is a good person. It's to say that if you want to have a law-based society, you have to apply it equally. And if you say no, well, it's not. It doesn't apply in this case because what a horrible person this Khamenei is. This whole regime is wrong. Then what's to stop China or Russia from using their argument to go in and take out a regime?
For instance, like
So
in Ukraine,
yeah, yeah,
right? We're in Ukraine for the reason that
yeah,
Putin has said
yeah.
he's gone in there to take out anything that he believes is illegal. Though I'd like to make one more point, which is that
For sure.
this situation may very well, in terms of conservative minds, for certain, change the narrative on Trump's situation back here at home. The Epstein files are on the back burner as we see him waging war in Iran, and it brings the election issue into full view now because you have a situation where he's been talking about invoking executive orders that would call it emergency elections because of foreign interference. He's claimed that. But the other point that I would make with this attack on Iran, he was getting hammered over Gaza, even by New York Jewish communities who believed that the Israeli government was doing things that were improper and illegal. And there was a real divide between the Jewish population, the Israeli population, on whether that was fair and right. But now you will have a Jewish population who not only may dislike Trump, but now may agree with Trump that what this was important for the Jewish state. So you might see some of those voters be pulled back towards him because of his definitive action against Iran. And I'm not going to judge whether that's right or wrong, but I think certainly when you're thinking about these decisions, you do have to think about the geopolitics and the internal politics of how it would affect your government. Do you think something like that would come into play? And do you think it really matters at this point?
Sure, I think absolutely it matters. I think Trump is very aware of it, just as Netanyahu is hoping this will help him in the next few months when he has to go for elections and he's facing all kinds of scandals and criminal charges.
For
So I
fraud.
think that's absolutely yeah.
Facing
So
fraud
I think
charges
that
within his own country. Mhm.
I'm sorry.
He's facing fraud charges within his own country. Sounds sort of
And
familiar.
within his own country, absolutely, you're absolutely right. So I mean, this going to war. These are all considered as well, and I think Trump was very cognizant of it, and it's also interesting because I think people get caught up in because it's Trump, thinking that it doesn't have the thoughtful process behind it. Sometimes that he just acts irrationally, or he's just acting on. And I'm not so sure that that's the proper way to look at it, I mean, or the right way. I mean, who knows? But I mean, there was something I was looking at too. Was it's very interesting. America sees China and its growth as being quite significant and its biggest opposition. And Trump is very cognizant of economic growth and who can challenge America. Energy, they're really going after. China was very dependent on or was a big customer of Venezuela, and had built up its relationship with Iran tremendously, and it was getting something like 30% of its oil, or or Iran's. I can't remember how that figure goes. Anyway, so this really um, might challenge China's energy needs. Was that part of the calculation? I mean, I just say these are all things that are very interesting to look at.
It's really interesting you stated that, Kathy, because the one thing in his executive order where he talks about these reasons for these emergency national election taking over national elections is because of the potential influence of interference from China. That's a new one. That's a new one. He didn't
Yeah.
say Russia. He said China.
No.
So I think you're onto something with that. Okay,
Yeah.
Kathy's at 44 minutes, and she promised me 30,
Yeah.
and I told her it was going to be 15. So now she knows I'm a liar whenever I say 15 minutes.
Well,
So
my pleasure.
please do me a favor. I love you guys signing up to my stuff, but please go on to Kathy. It's at Kathy Gannon, and sign up for her Substack. And Kathy, you need to get your monetization figured out so you can start buying yourself some of that delicious
Yeah, I'm
flatbread
counting on
and
Holly.
bod. Um,
Uh,
and maybe we'll talk to you in a day or two. We'll see things are going in Pakistan. But
yeah,
everybody, please, I'm seeing your comments. Thanks, Paul Meehan, for jumping in here. Paul, we saw Paul last night around the fire pit at the cabins. And I'm seeing people's notes about term limits and understand those things. I'm reading all that stuff, but I got to lose Kathy today because she has visitors at her house and it's getting late in Islamabad. So we'll say goodbye to, AP's best Middle Eastern and Far East correspondent, or not Far East, but Pakistani Afghan correspondent from the Associated Press, who's now retired and living her best life. And stay
yeah,
safe in Islamabad, and hopefully we'll be watching what's going on in that country to make sure you're safe. And
please.
I know you're not going to shelter in place.
No, not at all.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Okay, take care. Everybody else,
Thanks.
Kathy will go off, and I'll stay on for a couple more questions real quick with you guys. And then you can hop off, Kathy, if you need to.
If I can.
Yeah, it's probably just clicking out of your window there,
Yeah,
maybe hanging up your
there we
line.
go.
We'll take a couple more from you guys. Maybe I still have you. Um, Holly's written a couple down. What's the economic impact of all this, especially as it pertains to oil? That's a really great question. You guys, what's the economic impact of this, especially as it relates to oil? So I think that's yet to be seen. Obviously, there's a lot of sanctions on Iran as it relates to its economy, and some of those things are relating to how Iran can sell its oil. If you had a regime change in Iran, I think you'd see a much more favorable position for Iranian oil, and you might see. Obviously, you're going to see a lot of those sanctions get uh, relieved. So it might be great for the Iranian government, but I think we're premature at discussing that yet. The question is: the world oil supply going to change as a result of this war? It's certainly going to change the scenario. But does it change the scenario for Iran? I think that probably only happens if you have regime change there, not just a continuation of the same regime that's there. And I saw the note from, I think it's from Jack, or is it Jake? It's just J-A-K, Jack. I think it's Jack. Sort of like John spells his name J-O-H-N, and some people spell John. Sorry about that, guys. But yes, the question is this is more of a statement than the question, which is that we need term limits. The Constitution might say that would be one step too far in terms of what our Constitution would allow. But you certainly have to think that with all the people running in both the House and Senate, you look at Chuck Schumer, you look at Mitch McConnell, and this is not a political sides issue between Republicans and Democrats. You look at, all the people who stayed well into their 80s, and some have gone into their 90s, right? If you think of Strom Thurmond and those guys in the past, do we need new leadership in the United States so that we have term limits, so that we have more robust conversations with people that seem to be checked in? When you watch Mitch McConnell walk down the hallway now, he's got 5 people holding him. Is it time to retire for Mitch? Is it time to retire for Chuck Schumer? When you're there 40 years and your response to anything is we should call a meeting or I'm sending a letter, doesn't seem like that's really representative government. But nonetheless, that's an opinion of mine. What will be the impact to neighboring nations like Lebanon? We don't know yet. We don't know yet. We know that Iran has been very strong in its proxy efforts, right, with Hezbollah and Hamas. So will they still have the ability to project power through those groups? I think it's one of those things that, journalists, people always ask me who I think is going to win elections, right? And because we have some knowledge about how elections go, or we're really tuned in on each candidate. And, I always tell people, you have no idea who's going to win a fucking election, because polls have shown to been very wrong in the past. Hillary Clinton was supposed to be up 20 something points when she first ran against Donald Trump, and she lost that election in terms of the electoral college. We just don't know. And I think that this is one of those types of situations where you, instead of just following it and then commenting on it when you see what's going on and the impact of it, I think this is one of those things where we don't know the answer to it. So it's best to keep our mouth shut and just watch and learn as the responses are to that. Hamas has been greatly degraded by the Israeli military in Gaza while simultaneously committing war crimes. against the Palestinians, but in the same respect, it has been diminished, and you can't disregard that. And in Lebanon, I think you see a lot of people in Lebanon that are tired of conflict and tired of war. So we don't know where it's going to go, but I think it will depend on the new leadership Iran and whether they figured out or not whether this is a good path forward for them to continue fighting or not. So I'll take one more real quick. I know you guys it's Sunday morning and you guys are probably all getting ready for church while I'm getting ready for a Cinnabon. What's the impact of neighboring countries? Okay, that's one we just heard. Uh, yeah. Okay, that's probably all we've had for today.
There's like a couple of service members,
Yeah.
U.S. service members.
Yeah, we reported that the three U.S. service members have been killed. We don't know where are the details. At least we haven't seen that on CENTCOM, Central Command's press releases this morning. And again, my biggest thing is that we don't have reporters in the region on these ships and on these bases like you would normally in the past. I used to embed with impunity with U.S. military troops because I think it's really important that you have media on the ground in these places because American lives are at stake. You know, U.S. military personnel, they're not widgets. They're not cattle, and their lives are important. And when we put those lives at risk, regardless of political party that's fighting a conflict, we should know the repercussions of the wars that we get into for those people and their families, and for national security concerns of the United States. These are all very deep, important questions. And by the Pentagon cutting off access to these things, I think does a great disservice to the United States and our democracy. And it means a lot about in terms of what kind of democracy we have when you're cutting off access to the media and understanding important questions that they would relay through you to the American people, you're stepping closer and closer to a totalitarian dictatorship. And that is a big problem for democracy. And I'm not saying that because Donald Trump's in office. If Joe Biden was doing this right now, I'd be screaming from the rooftop saying, "Hey, Joe, what are you doing? Wake up on us here. You know, get a little less sleepy today because the media deserves to be seeing these things." But unfortunately, when they say we're the liberal media, we're libtards, or we're leftists, and all this shit, well, tell me the last time a Democratic government run by Democrats cut off all media access to all reporters all the time. It did not happen. It does not happen. So call me a libtard, call me whatever you want to do, but libtards apparently don't cut off access to reporters and democracy. So dictators do, people like Vladimir Putin do, people like Kim Jong-un in North Korea do, and they do that in China. So you take that for what it's worth. It's a fact. So I don't want to get too fired up and get my blood pressure up. I can see the light turning my head even redder. I'm going to get another cup of coffee. I have a friend here also by the name of Jeff sitting at the end of the table who's staying up in our cabins and enlightening me on all sorts of great stuff. So we're going to have another cup of coffee. I'm going to put some cinnamon buns in the thing, and we're going to get on with our lives today. We'll be talking about these election issues in the coming days. I also have a really close friend of mine who's Persian who wrote a book about Iran and the uprising there that I think would have some really good insights. If I can get her to come on the broadcast in the coming days, that would be great. And maybe she'll come on if she thinks she's going to sell some more of her books. Right? All right. So from the Writer's Cabin, you guys, thanks very much, and you guys have a great Sunday.